The medical bay had become a strange kind of organized chaos. 8 hours had passed since the first wounded arrived, and they just kept coming. Shuttle after shuttle brought more casualties from the battle raging on the moon's surface below. Jinho worked without stopping, moving from patient to patient with the same calm efficiency he'd shown from the beginning. Veltros and Perix followed him like students, learning techniques they'd never seen in any medical textbook. The alien doctors were discovering something remarkable. Every species in the coalition had different anatomy. Different blood colors, different organ placements, different skin types. But Jinho's basic principles worked on all of them. Pressure stopped bleeding whether the blood was red, green, or purple. Bones needed to be aligned and stabilized regardless of whether they were made of calcium or crystal. Airways needed to stay open whether the patient breathed oxygen, methane, or something else entirely. It's like he's treating the injury, not the species, Perix observed quietly to Veltros during a brief moment between patients. That's exactly what he's doing, Veltros replied, his spots pulsing thoughtfully. We've been so focused on species-specific treatments that we forgot about universal principles. A new shuttle arrived, this one smoking and damaged. It crash-landed roughly in the docking bay. When the doors opened, the situation inside was grim. 6 wounded soldiers lay in pools of their own blood and ichor. In the middle of them sat a wounded Quillian medic, trying desperately to treat the others despite being badly injured himself. But the worst case was carried in on a stretcher. A young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. Human. Her name was Kim Sora, and she wasn't breathing properly. Jinho's face changed when he saw her. The calm mask slipped for just a moment, showing something harder underneath. Then it was back in place and he was moving. Airway obstruction, he said, tilting her head back and checking her mouth. Nothing visible blocking it. Her breathing still didn't improve. Swelling from smoke inhalation. I need to secure her airway. We have 2 endotracheal tubes left, Veltros said, rushing to get them. But both are adult-sized. Jinho looked at the tubes, then shook his head. Too big. They'll damage her trachea. He reached into his canvas bag and pulled out a simple plastic drinking straw, still in its wrapper. This will work. Veltros's spots flashed bright red with alarm. Corporal, you absolutely cannot intubate a child with a drinking straw. That's not sterile. It's not designed for medical use. It's sealed in plastic and it's the right diameter, Jinho interrupted, already opening the wrapper carefully to keep it as clean as possible. He poured the alcohol over it for extra sterilization, and she's going to die if I don't get air into her lungs in about 30 seconds. He positioned himself at the girl's head, tilted it back at the correct angle, and inserted the straw into her airway using nothing but his trained hands and anatomical knowledge. No camera to guide him, no computer assistance, just skill and experience. Perix manual ventilation bag. Hook it to the straw. Squeeze slowly and gently. Her lungs are small. The young Quillian's hands shook slightly as he attached the ventilation bag to the makeshift tube. He squeezed. The girl's chest rose. Her oxygen levels began to climb from critical red into yellow, then green. She's breathing, Perix whispered, amazed. She's alive, Jinho corrected. Keep bagging her. Slow and steady, 1 breath every 5 seconds. The swelling should go down in 6 to 8 hours, then she can breathe on her own. He moved immediately to the next patient, but Veltros noticed him glance back at the little girl twice. There was something personal there. Some memory or experience that made this case different from the others. The work continued. Jinho taught them how to make pressure bandages from sheets and tape, how to fashion splints from anything rigid, how to create drainage systems from plastic tubing and gravity. Every solution was simple, but every solution required deep understanding of how bodies worked. A Bravaxian soldier came in with multiple pieces of shrapnel embedded in his torso. Normally, this would require sophisticated scanning equipment and precise surgical tools to remove each piece safely. They had neither. Jinho examined the wounds carefully with his hands, palpating gently around each entry point. This one's superficial, left it for later. This one's near a major vessel, we need it out now. This one's not bleeding much, probably embedded in muscle, low priority. Using nothing but forceps, good lighting, and steady hands, he removed 3 pieces of shrapnel. He packed each wound with gauze, covered it with more gauze, and sealed everything with layers of tape. How did you know which ones to remove first? Perix asked, fascinated. Experience and anatomy, Jinho said. You learn to feel where the blood vessels are, where the organs sit. Every species is different, but there are patterns. Major vessels are usually deep and protected. If something's bleeding a lot, it's either a vessel or very vascular tissue. You prioritize based on what will kill the patient fastest. Veltros watched this human work and felt his understanding of medicine shift. He had always thought of medicine as a science of precision and technology. But Jinho practiced it as an art of adaptation and resourcefulness. During a rare quiet moment, Veltros approached Jinho as he was restocking his supplies. May I ask you something personal, Corporal? Sure. Where did you learn all of this? These techniques aren't in any coalition medical database. I've reviewed human medical journals and they focus on equipment-based treatments, similar to ours. Jinho organized his tape and tubes methodically as he spoke. Field hospital on Ganymede Station, like I mentioned. Before that, emergency room in Busan City during the food shortage riots. Thousands of wounded, not enough supplies, not enough doctors. You learn fast or people die. He paused, something crossing his face. Before that, my grandfather taught me. He was a combat medic in the old territorial wars on Earth, the ones before we unified. He said the best tool is the one you have with you. Knowledge and skill go everywhere. Equipment can be lost or broken. Your planet fought wars against itself, Perix asked, confused. But you're all the same species. Yeah, Jinho said simply. Different nations, different beliefs, different resources. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Still do in some places, though it's better now than it used to be. Veltros's spots pulsed with troubled colors. That's horrifying. Why would you fight your own kind? Lots of reasons. Most of them stupid. Jinho zipped up his bag. But it taught us how to do medicine in terrible conditions. No fancy equipment, just blood and pain and the need to keep people alive with whatever you could grab. 5,000 years of that teaches you things that peace and plenty can't. So human medicine is advanced because you've spent so long at war? Perix's spots showed confusion. No, Jinho corrected. Human medicine is practical because we've spent so long without resources. War was just one reason among many. Natural disasters, famines, plagues, accidents. We've had to improvise survival for our entire history. Only in the last century or so have we had reliable technology, and even then only in some places. He looked around at the gleaming medical bay with its sophisticated equipment. Your species developed advanced technology early and built your medicine around it. That's not wrong, but it means you never had to learn the hard lessons. You never had to keep someone alive with just your hands and whatever random supplies you could find. Veltros was quiet for a long moment. Our medical technology is superior to yours by centuries. Yes, Jinho agreed. But our medical knowledge is not. It's different, Jinho said diplomatically. You know things we don't. Alien anatomies, advanced procedures, regeneration techniques. But we know how to make do when everything goes wrong. Both kinds of knowledge are valuable. An alarm sounded. Another shuttle approaching. This one broadcasting an emergency signal. The pilot's voice came through crackling with static and panic. Mayday, mayday! We have critical wounded including our medic. Hull damage, life support failing. Requesting immediate emergency landing. The shuttle came in too fast, scraping along the landing bay floor with a terrible screech of metal. Its doors had to be forced open manually. Inside were 5 wounded coalition soldiers in bad shape. And in the worst shape of all was the medic, a Quillian named Tixvan. A piece of shrapnel had torn through his crystalline exoskeleton into his thorax. His spots were barely glowing at all. Veltros rushed forward and stopped dead. Tixvan, no, 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 no. His spots flashed in patterns Jinho had never seen before. Panic, grief, and terror all at once, Doctor, Jinho said carefully. He's my student, Veltros said, his voice breaking. I trained him. I taught him everything he knows. I sent him to that shuttle. I can't. We don't have the equipment to. He's going to die, Dr. Veltros, Jinho said firmly. Look at me. The Quillian's many-faceted eyes focused on him. Are you a doctor? Yes, but then be one. Right now, he doesn't need his teacher. He needs his doctor. Can you do that? Veltros's spots flickered wildly. Then slowly they began to stabilize into the controlled patterns Jinho had learned meant focus and determination. Yes, Veltros said. Yes, I can do that. Good. Now tell me about Quillian anatomy. Where are his major ichor vessels? Where are his vital organs? What do I need to know? Working together, they saved Tixvan's life with gauze, pressure, tape, and 2 days had passed since the crisis began. The wounded continued to arrive, though the flow had finally started to slow. In that time, Jinho had worked almost without rest, catching only brief naps when Perix or Veltros insisted he take a break. The medical bay looked nothing like it had when they started. The pristine, organized space had been transformed into something that resembled a wartime field hospital. Supplies were scattered on every surface, ready for immediate use. Tape and makeshift bandages were everywhere. But every patient was stable, and more importantly, every patient was alive. Commander Rathmel stood in the observation area with several other Coalition officers who had come to see the situation for themselves. Word had spread through the fleet about the medical frigate that hadn't lost a single patient, despite losing most of its equipment. "It's remarkable," said Captain Drinos, a four-armed Bravaxian commander from another ship. "We've been sending our critical cases to you instead of our own medical bays. Your survival rate is higher than ours even though we have full equipment." "It's not our rate," Rathmel said. "It's his." They all watched through the window as Jinho taught Perix how to create a traction splint, using cargo netting, zip ties, and a piece of bent metal conduit. The young Quillian's spots glowed brightly as he learned, asking questions and practicing the technique. Veltros approached the human, his own spots pulsing in thoughtful patterns. "Corporal Park, I need to understand something." Jinho didn't stop working, but he listened. "Go ahead." "My species has practiced medicine for 7,000 years. We have technology that can regrow entire limbs. We can clone organs, repair damage at the cellular level, extend lifespans by centuries. Yet here you are with tape and plastic tubes achieving comparable emergency results. Why didn't we think of these methods?" Jinho tested the splint's tension before answering. "You did think of them, probably thousands of years ago when your medicine was primitive. Then you got better tools and forgot the old ways. That seems inefficient." "Maybe," Jinho shrugged. "But humans haven't had better tools for very long. Most of Earth still uses what you'd call basic medicine. We joined the Coalition 40 years ago. We're still catching up technologically. My grandmother didn't have a regeneration pod. She had pins and screws and months of physical therapy. My grandfather treated battle wounds with bandages and prayer because regenerators didn't exist for us yet." He attached the splint to a patient, a Bravaxian merchant who'd been trapped under collapsed building materials. "We remember the simple ways because we still need them. And sometimes the simple ways are better." Veltros's spots flickered with confusion. How can basic technology be superior to advanced technology? "It's not about superior or inferior," Jinho said patiently. "It's about appropriate and adaptable. Your bone regenerator is amazing, absolutely miraculous, but it needs power, calibration, specific environmental conditions. It breaks down, it can be destroyed in a hull breach." He held up his ever-present roll of tape. "This works anywhere, no power needed, no calibration required, doesn't care about species or atmosphere or gravity. It's not precise, but it doesn't need to be. Medicine isn't about precision. It's about keeping people alive long enough for precision to matter later." Perix approached with a data pad. "Dr. Veltros, I've compiled the statistics you requested. We've treated 63 patients total over the past 48 hours. 0 fatalities. The projected survival rate with our depleted supplies was calculated at 62%. Veltros's spots went dark with shock. "That's impossible." "Not impossible," Jinho said, checking a patient's vital signs. "Just different priorities. You were thinking about treating patients perfectly. I'm thinking about treating patients, period. Perfect can wait until they're not dying." A medical transport arrived with a single patient. The emergency team brought him in fast, their movements urgent. The patient was a young human man named Cho Minho, unconscious and barely alive. The scanner readings made Veltros's spots pulse with alarm. Massive internal bleeding, liver laceration, ruptured spleen, damage to multiple organs. He needs immediate surgery, blood transfusion, organ repair, or replacement. Veltros looked at Jinho with desperate spots. "Corporal, we don't have the equipment for this. Even with all your improvisation skills, I don't see how—" "You're right," Jinho interrupted, studying the scans. His face was grim. "I can't fix this here. We don't have what we need." Veltros felt crushing defeat. Finally, they had found the limit of human improvisation. Some things simply couldn't be fixed with tape and creativity. But Jinho was already turning to Commander Rathmel. "Commander, what ships do we have nearby with full surgical capabilities?" "The destroyer Resolute Dawn is about 3 hours away. They have complete surgical facilities. Why?" Tell them we're sending a critical patient who needs immediate surgery. I'm going with him to keep him alive during transport. You're going to transport him? Veltros was shocked. He'll die before you arrive. He'll definitely die if he stays here, Jinho said bluntly. On the destroyer, he has a chance. Sometimes the answer isn't improvisation. Sometimes it's knowing when you need proper equipment and making sure the patient survives long enough to reach it. He began issuing rapid orders. Maximum IV fluids to replace volume. Apply external pressure to the abdomen to slow internal bleeding. Wrap him tight with all the elastic bandaging we have left. Perix, prep him for transport. Commander, I need that shuttle ready in 5 minutes. Everyone moved at once. Veltros helped, still amazed at how the human had instantly shifted from field medicine to transport medicine. Different problems required different solutions. Within 10 minutes, Minho was wrapped, stabilized, and loaded onto a medical shuttle. Jinho climbed aboard with a fresh supply of his simple tools. Keep him breathing and keep his blood pressure up, Veltros said. Get him there alive. That's the job, Jinho replied. He looked at Perix. You're in charge until I get back. Remember what I taught you. Simple solutions, fast action. Don't overthink it. I understand, Corporal. The shuttle launched, accelerating toward the distant destroyer. Through the observation window, Veltros watched it disappear into the darkness of space. He'll save that boy, Perix said with confidence. I believe in him. So do I, Veltros admitted. That's what troubles me. Troubles you, Doctor? I'm a trained physician with 7,000 years of accumulated medical knowledge behind me. 2 days ago, I would have said human medicine was primitive and crude. Now I'm trusting a human with tape and tubes to do what I couldn't do with all my technology. He turned to look at the medical bay. Patients rested comfortably, treated with improvised solutions that shouldn't have worked but did. His sophisticated equipment sat on the shelves, much of it unused because simpler methods had proven more effective. I've been practicing medicine wrong, Veltros said quietly, not incorrectly but incompletely. I learned to heal in perfect conditions with perfect tools. I never learned to heal when everything goes wrong. So learn now, Perix said simply. That's what Corporal Park is teaching us. Over the next hours, Perix took the lead in treating new patients, applying everything Jinho had shown him. Veltros assisted, watching his young student work with newfound confidence. The techniques were simple, but the principles behind them were profound. A communication came in from other coalition ships. They wanted to know about the methods being used. How were they achieving such good results with so little equipment? Captain Drinos contacted them directly. Dr. Veltros, I'm formally requesting that you compile the humans' techniques into a training document. Other ships need this knowledge. I'll begin immediately, Veltros agreed. But where to start? How did you teach improvisation? How did you document creativity? The techniques themselves were simple, but the thinking behind them was complex. It required understanding not just what to do, but why to do it and how to adapt when circumstances changed. He started by having the computer record everything. Every technique, every improvised tool, every decision-making process. But even as he did it, he knew something would be lost in the recording. You couldn't fully capture the calmness under pressure, the quick assessment of priorities, the willingness to use unconventional solutions. 12 hours later, Jinho returned. Minho was in surgery aboard the destroyer with a good chance of full recovery. The human looked exhausted but satisfied. How did you keep him alive for 3 hours? Veltros asked. Constant monitoring, pressure maintenance, and a lot of hoping, Jinho said honestly. Also, I talked to him the whole time. Unconscious patients can sometimes hear. I told him about my grandfather, about home, about why he needed to keep fighting. Maybe it helped. Maybe it didn't, but it gave me something to do besides worry. He looked around the medical bay. How did things go here? Perix handled everything perfectly, Veltros said with pride. He learned well. Good teachers make good students, Jinho said with a tired smile. I learned from my grandfather. Perix learned from you and now from me. That's how knowledge survives. We pass it along. A message came through from Coalition Medical Command. They wanted a full report on the crisis and the techniques used. The first wounded soldier they brought in was dying. Her name was Talvin, and she belonged to the same species as Commander Rathmel. She had 4 arms like him and green moss growing on her skin, but the moss was burned black in many places. Worse still, a deep cut ran across her chest and thick green liquid pumped out with each heartbeat. Veltros rushed forward immediately, his spots flashing bright red with alarm. "We need a Type 7 vascular clamp and a dermal regenerator right now." Perix checked the computer inventory, his young spots flickering with panic. "Doctor, both of those were in the section we lost. We don't have them anymore." On the monitoring screen, Talvin's vital signs dropped rapidly. Her breathing became fast and shallow. All four of her arms twitched and spasmed. She was going into shock. "She's dying," Veltros said, his voice breaking. "Without the proper equipment, I cannot stop the bleeding. It's too severe." Jinho stepped forward, already tearing off a long strip of the silver tape. "How fast does her species blood clot?" he asked calmly. "It's called ichor, not blood," Veltros corrected automatically, even in his panic. "Bravaxians have excellent natural clotting ability, but the wound is far too large for natural processes to work in time." "Good enough," Jinho said. He grabbed a stack of clean gauze pads and pressed them directly into the wound with firm pressure. Talvin groaned in pain, but he didn't let up. Then he began laying strips of the packing tape across the gauze in a crosshatch pattern, pulling the edges of the wound together as he worked. "What are you doing?" Veltros cried out. "That's barbaric. The adhesive could contaminate the wound. It could cause tissue damage. It could—" "The tape adhesive is touching the gauze, not her skin," Jinho explained as he continued working with steady hands. "And she's going to be dead in about 2 minutes if we don't stop this bleeding. We can worry about making it pretty later. Right now we keep her alive." He finished the tape application, creating a tight seal over the wound. Then he grabbed some supply crates and stacked them under Talvin's legs, elevating them above her heart. "Shock position," he said. "Keeps blood flowing to the vital organs. Do you have fluid replacement for her species?" "Yes," Perix said, already moving. "We have saline solution made for Bravaxians. Start 2 IV lines. Run them both wide open. She needs volume replacement fast." Perix worked quickly, inserting the needles and starting the fluid drip. Veltros watched his monitoring screen in shock. The bleeding had slowed to almost nothing. Talvin's vital signs were stabilizing. Her breathing was becoming more regular. "It worked," Veltros whispered. "Your primitive method actually worked." "Not primitive," Jinho corrected gently. "Just practical. Perix, check her vital signs every 5 minutes. If blood soaks through the dressing, don't remove it. Just add more gauze and tape over top. Removing it could restart the bleeding." "Understood," Perix said, his spots glowing with newfound respect. Jinho moved immediately to the next patient. This one was a young human woman, probably mid-20s. Her name was Lee Nari, and she worked as a civilian contractor on the moon's surface. She was conscious but very pale, holding her right arm at an awkward angle. Bone stuck out through her skin, white and terrible. Veltros examined her quickly. "Compound fracture of the radius and ulna. We need a bone regenerator and a sterile surgical suite to properly set this." "Both lost," Perix reminded him quietly. "Right," Jinho said, kneeling beside Nari. He spoke to her in Korean, his voice soft and reassuring. Then he switched to standard coalition language for the others. "I need the strongest painkiller you have that's safe for humans. Also bring me that clear alcohol, some clean padding, and something rigid. Plastic or metal about this long." He held his hands about 30 centimeters apart. While Perix gathered the supplies, Jinho kept talking to Nari in Korean. Whatever he was saying seemed to calm her down. Her breathing slowed and some color returned to her face. The supplies arrived. Jinho administered the pain medication through an injection, then waited exactly 2 minutes by his watch. He positioned himself carefully, gripping her arm above and below the break. "This is going to hurt a lot," he told her in Korean, "but it will be fast. On 3, okay? 1, 2, on 2, he pulled. There was a horrible crunching sound as the bone pieces moved back into alignment. Nari screamed, then burst into tears. But Jinho had already pushed the protruding bone back under her skin with one smooth, practiced motion. "Worst part is done," he said gently. Still in Korean, he cleaned the wound site with alcohol-soaked gauze, his movements quick but careful. "Perix, hold this piece of metal plating against her arm like this. Yes, right along where the bone is. Nari, you need to stay very still now." He wrapped her arm in soft padding first, then began wrapping the packing tape around and around. The tape went over the padding and the metal plate, creating a rigid structure that held everything in place. Round and round he went, creating layer after layer, until the arm was completely immobilized. Veltros scanned the arm with his medical device. The bone was properly aligned, The wound was clean. The whole arm was stable and secure. It's crude, he admitted slowly, but it's effective. The fracture is properly set. Crude keeps people alive until proper care is available, Jinho said, already moving to the next patient. Triage medicine isn't about perfection. It's about good enough, fast enough. Who's next? The next patient was named Rixtal, a soldier from Veltros's own species. His crystalline exoskeleton was cracked badly across his chest. Every time he breathed, air whistled in and out of the wound. His spots were flickering weakly, barely visible. Veltros reached instinctively for a sophisticated pressure seal device, then remembered with horror that they were all gone. He has a sucking chest wound. Air is moving in and out of his thoracic cavity. He'll develop a collapsed lung and die unless we seal it immediately. Jinho was already cutting a square piece from a plastic supply bag. He placed it directly over the wound and taped 3 sides down with the packing tape, leaving the 4th side open. The whistling stopped instantly. Rixtal's breathing improved within seconds. One-way valve, Jinho explained. Air can escape on the exhale but can't get sucked back in on the inhale. Old combat medic trick. We used to do this with food packaging and tape. Perix watches oxygen saturation levels. If they drop, we'll need to adjust. Understood, Perix said. His spots were now glowing with admiration. More wounded kept coming. Jinho moved from patient to patient with calm efficiency. He used zip ties as improvised tourniquets. He made splints from broken equipment and tape. He fashioned drainage tubes from plastic straws. Every solution was simple, direct, and effective. Veltros followed behind him, learning despite himself. This human's methods were unorthodox, yes. They seemed crude compared to sophisticated coalition technology. But they worked. By all the laws of medical science, they shouldn't work this well, but they did. After 3 hours of continuous work, they had treated 20 patients. Not a single one had died. Several who should have died by all medical predictions were stable and resting. Commander Rathmel stood in the observation window, watching everything with his 4 eyes. When Veltros took a brief break to drink some water, the commander approached him. Your assessment of the human, doctor? Veltros looked across the medical bay at Jinho, who was now teaching Perix how to make an improvised chest tube. His spots pulsed in a complex pattern that showed confusion, respect, and wonder all at once. He's either a genius or completely insane, Veltros said finally. Possibly both. But Commander, he hasn't lost a single patient. With our sophisticated equipment, I would have expected at least 3 fatalities by now, given the severity of the wounds. So his methods work. His methods shouldn't work, but yes, they do. Veltros paused, choosing his words carefully. I think perhaps we've been practicing medicine incorrectly. How so? We've been practicing medicine for ideal conditions. Perfect equipment, perfect environments, perfect situations. The human practices medicine for reality, for when nothing is perfect and everything goes wrong. And in those conditions, his simple solutions are better than our complicated ones. Another shuttle was approaching. More wounded were coming. Veltros watched Jinho prepare to receive them. That roll of silver tape always within reach. Perhaps, Veltros thought, there was more to learn from this primitive species than anyone had imagined. The Coalition medical ship floated quietly in space above the war-torn moon. Inside the pristine white medical bay, Dr. Veltros admired his equipment with pride. The alien doctor looked like a large insect made of crystal, with spots on his body that glowed different colors when he felt emotions. Right now, those spots shone bright blue with happiness. 200 medical tools lined the walls in perfect order. Each tool had its own special purpose, designed to treat the 17 different alien species that belonged to the Coalition. Veltros had spent years learning to use every single one. Commander Rathmel stood beside him, a massive creature with green moss growing on his skin and 4 powerful arms. He nodded his approval as he looked around the medical bay. Everything looks ready, Doctor, the commander said in his deep voice. The human medical officer should arrive within the hour. Veltros's glowing spots flickered with curiosity. Humans were new to the Coalition. Having joined only 40 years ago, most species still considered them primitive and backwards. Their technology was centuries behind everyone else. Veltros wondered what kind of doctor such a species could produce. Before he could voice his thoughts, the entire ship shook violently. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Red emergency lights began flashing everywhere. Hull breach on Deck 3, shouted Ensign Kira from her station. Her tentacles moved frantically across multiple control panels at once. Debris from the battle hit us. The ship lurched again, throwing equipment and personnel across the room. Veltros grabbed onto a railing with his thin limbs, his spots turning dark purple with fear. Somewhere in the distance he heard the terrible sound of metal tearing and air rushing into the void of space. Emergency doors slammed shut throughout the ship, sealing off the damaged sections. When the chaos finally stopped, Veltros rushed to check the supply inventory on his computer screen. What he saw made his spots go completely dark. "Commander," he said, his voice shaking, "we've lost 70% of our medical supplies. Entire storage sections are gone. Blown into space." Rathamul's four eyes widened in alarm. Of their 200 carefully organized medical instruments, only 58 remained. The rest had been in the cargo bay that was now open to the vacuum of space. A communication signal beeped on the console. "Coalition frigate, this is Transport Shuttle Busan 7. We have your human medical liaison on board. Requesting permission to dock." The commander and doctor exchanged worried looks. "Permission granted," Rathmul said heavily. "Though I fear he arrives to find a disaster." 20 minutes later, the airlock doors opened with a hiss of pressurized air. The human who stepped through was not what they expected at all. Corporal Park Jinho was short compared to most coalition species, standing only about 5.5 feet tall. He had black hair, dark eyes, and skin the color of light brown earth. He wore a slightly worn coalition uniform with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Most surprising of all, he carried only one bag. It was gray, made of canvas, and looked like it had seen better days. "Corporal Park reporting for duty," Jinho said with a small bow. His voice was calm and steady. "I hear you've had some trouble." Veltros approached quickly, his spots pulsing with anxiety. "Corporal Park, I must inform you of a serious situation. We have suffered catastrophic equipment loss. Of our 200 medical instruments, only 58 remain functional." He gestured toward the empty shelves and damaged storage units. "We have wounded soldiers coming from the planet's surface. Coalition forces and civilians. Many will need immediate treatment. He paused, his spots dimming with despair. "I don't know how we will manage with so little equipment." Jinho set his canvas bag down on a medical table and unzipped it slowly. Inside were several rolls of silver tape, plastic zip ties, a bottle of clear alcohol, some plastic tubes, rubber bands, and various other simple items that looked like they came from a hardware store rather than a medical facility. "Well," Jinho said, pulling out a roll of the silver tape and examining it thoughtfully. "This should cover it." Veltros's spots flickered rapidly in confusion. Commander Rathmul's four eyes blinked one after another, each showing the same bewilderment. "Corporal," Veltros said carefully, as if speaking to someone who might not understand. "That is packing tape." "Yep," Jinho confirmed with a slight smile. "It's like duct tape's cousin. Very useful stuff. Now where are these wounded you mentioned?" Veltros looked at Commander Rathmul. The commander looked back at Veltros. Neither knew what to say. This human thought he could treat serious combat injuries with tape from a supply closet. "Corporal Park," Veltros began again, trying to be patient. "I appreciate your willingness to help, but medical treatment requires sophisticated instruments. We need precision tools, sterile environments, advanced technology. What you have there is practical," Jinho finished for him. He began laying out his simple supplies on the table in an organized manner. "Look, Doctor, I understand you're used to fancy equipment. That's great when you have it. But right now you don't have it. So we work with what we've got. But tape?" Perix, Veltros's young assistant, spoke up. He was smaller than Veltros, with brighter spots that showed his youth. "How can tape help with medical emergencies?" Jinho looked at the young alien with patient eyes. "Tape can hold wounds closed. It can secure bandages. It can make splints. It can seal chest wounds. It can do about 100 different things if you know how to use it properly." He picked up one of the plastic tubes. "This can be an airway if someone can't breathe. These zip ties can be tourniquets in an emergency. This alcohol sterilizes. Everything has multiple uses if you think creatively." Before anyone could respond, the communication system crackled to life. "Medical Bay, first casualty shuttle is approaching. ETA 3 minutes. We have 12 wounded, 3 critical." Veltros's spots went pale. 3 critical patients, and they barely had any equipment left. This was going to be a disaster. Jinho simply rolled up his sleeves higher and began washing his hands at the sink. All right then. Let's get to work. Perix, was it? I'll need you to be my assistant. Dr. Veltros, you coordinate the others and tell me about alien anatomy as we go. Commander, we'll need all the clean sheets and towels you can find. You're taking charge? Veltros asked, surprised. Someone has to, Jinho said simply. And I've done this before. Field hospital on Ganymede Station during the mining colony collapse. Treated 200 wounded with whatever we could scavenge. This is actually better. At least we have a proper medical bay and some real supplies. The shuttle arrived with a loud clang as it docked. The doors opened and medical personnel began rushing wounded inside on stretchers. Blood and strange alien fluid stained the floor. The smell of burnt flesh and fear filled the air. Jinho moved toward the first stretcher without hesitation, his canvas bag in hand. Veltros watched the human go, his spots swirling with doubt and worry. This was either going to be the worst disaster of his medical career, or something completely unexpected. Either way, there was no choice now. The wounded needed help, and all they had was a human with a bag full of tape. 2 weeks had passed since the crisis on Talos 7 ended. The fighting had stopped, the wounded had been evacuated, and the survivors were recovering across various coalition medical facilities. The medical frigate had received full equipment replacements, and the bay now gleamed with new instruments. All 200 specialized medical tools had been restored to their proper places. Everything was clean, organized, and ready for sophisticated medical procedures. It looked exactly like it had before the disaster. Except for one thing. On a supply shelf near the main treatment area, sitting among the advanced medical devices, was a simple roll of packing tape. It looked completely out of place next to the gleaming technology, but nobody had moved it. Veltros stood in the restored medical bay, his spots pulsing in complex patterns. He was alone except for his thoughts. The sophisticated equipment surrounded him, representing the pinnacle of coalition medical science. Yet he found himself staring at that roll of tape. Commander Rathmul entered, carrying a data pad. Doctor, the Coalition Medical Council has sent their response to your report. And? Veltros asked, though his spots already showed he was worried about the answer. They're impressed with the survival statistics. 0 fatalities from 73 critical cases is unprecedented, especially given the equipment loss. The commander paused. But there's resistance to the proposed training program. Let me guess. Some species find the methods too primitive, beneath their dignity? Several council members used exactly those words, Rathmul confirmed. They argue that coalition medicine should focus on advancing technology, not reverting to basic techniques. Veltros's spots flashed bright red with anger. Their dignity won't save lives when their ships lose power or their equipment fails. I was one of those people, Commander. I looked at Corporal Park and his tape and thought him ignorant. I was wrong, I know. But changing minds across the entire coalition will be difficult. Before Veltros could respond, Perix rushed in, his spots glowing with excitement. Doctor, a communication from Earth. The Seoul Medical Institute wants to establish an exchange program with our medical academy. They're offering to teach coalition doctors what they call wilderness medicine and disaster response protocols. Accept it, Veltros said immediately. Request whatever resources they need. Already done, Commander Rathmul said. I also made another decision. Corporal Park has been permanently assigned to this ship as senior medical instructor. As if summoned by his name, Jinho walked into the medical bay. He still carried his old canvas bag, though it had been cleaned and repaired. He stopped and looked around at all the new equipment, letting out a low whistle of appreciation. Now this is a proper medical facility. You could do some serious work with all this. We could do serious work with much less, I've learned, Veltros said. He approached the human, extending a crystalline limb. Corporal Park, I owe you an apology. I judged your methods and your species unfairly based on my own limited understanding. Jinho shook the offered appendage carefully. No apology needed, Doctor. You learned and you adapted. That's all anyone can ask. The Medical Council wants you to develop training protocols for the entire Coalition Medical Corps, Rathmul informed him. I'll need help, Jinho said immediately. Different species have completely different anatomies. I can teach the general principles, but the specific applications need experts who understand each species. Like Dr. Veltros here. Veltros's spots pulsed with what Jinho had learned was pleasure and pride. A collaborative approach, combining human practical knowledge with coalition medical expertise. Exactly. Jinho pulled out a fresh roll of tape from his bag and tossed it to Perix. First lesson for the training program. Always keep one of these in your emergency kit. You never know when you'll need it. Perix caught it, his spots brightening. What about the 200 other tools we now have? Keep those too, Jinho said with a slight smile. Use them when you can, but know how to work without them when you must. The day you can't tell the difference between being well-equipped and being well-prepared is the day you become dependent instead of capable. A philosophy lesson disguised as medical training. Veltros observed. All good medicine is partly philosophy, Jinho said. It's about understanding what truly matters, and what matters is keeping people alive, whether you have the best equipment in the galaxy or just your hands and whatever you can find. Over the next hours, they began developing the training curriculum together. Veltros contributed his deep knowledge of alien anatomies. Perix helped document each technique in precise detail. Jinho provided the practical demonstrations and explained the thinking process behind each decision. They were interrupted by visitors. Young Kim Sora arrived with her parents. The little girl who had nearly died from airway obstruction was now fully recovered, running and playing like the trauma had never happened. She wore a small backpack and seemed excited about something. When she saw Jinho, she ran straight to him and hugged his legs tightly. "Thank you for saving me," she said in Korean, then switched to Coalition Standard language so the others could understand. "The doctors said I should have died, but you didn't let me." Jinho knelt down to her eye level. "You saved yourself by being strong and fighting to stay alive. I just helped a little bit." "With tape," she said very seriously. "Mommy told me you fixed my breathing with tape and a straw. And a few other things. But yes, tape was involved." Sora reached into her backpack and pulled out a small roll of packing tape. "I keep this with me now, just in case I need to help someone someday." Her parents laughed, slightly embarrassed, but Jinho smiled warmly and held out his fist. Sora bumped it with her small hand, a human gesture she'd obviously learned. "That's very smart," Jinho told her. "Always be prepared to help others." After the family left, Veltros approached Jinho. The human was organizing his training materials, but there was something different in his expression. Something softer. "She reminds you of someone," Veltros said. It wasn't a question. Jinho was quiet for a moment. "My sister's daughter, my niece. She died in a building collapse during the Busan riots. I was 20 minutes away, stuck in traffic. By the time I got there with my medical kit, it was too late. She'd suffocated in the rubble." His hands stilled on the supplies. "I became a medic because of her. Learned everything I could about emergency medicine, about keeping people alive in impossible situations. I told myself that if I couldn't save her, maybe I could save someone else's niece. Someone else's daughter." Veltros's spots pulsed with deep sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, and it was 8 years ago. The pain doesn't go away, but you learn to carry it." Jinho resumed organizing. "That's why I volunteer for the dangerous assignments. Why I'm here instead of safe on Earth. Because there are other little girls out there who need someone who knows how to improvise when everything goes wrong." "You've made quite an impact," Veltros said, "not just medically but philosophically. You've challenged how we think about medicine, about technology, about what it means to be advanced. I just showed you what my grandfather showed me. The basics never stop being important no matter how fancy your tools get." Perix approached with more data. "The training program proposal is complete. We're suggesting mandatory courses for all coalition medical personnel, basic improvisation techniques, resource-limited treatment protocols, and emergency field medicine. The Human Medical Corps will provide primary instruction with species-specific adaptations from coalition doctors. There will still be resistance," Rathmel warned. "Let them resist," Veltros said firmly. "The statistics don't lie. Our methods work. Eventually, practicality will overcome pride." A communication alert sounded. Another ship was requesting emergency medical assistance. Their medical bay had suffered a power failure during a routine procedure. 3 patients in critical condition, no way to use their sophisticated equipment. Jinho was already grabbing his canvas bag. "What species are the patients?" "2 Bravaxian, 1 Quillian," Perix read from the alert. "Right. Dr. Veltros, you're with me for the Quillian patient." Perix, gather basic supplies, tape, gauze, tubing, antiseptic. Commander, we'll need a shuttle ready in 5 minutes. Everyone moved into action immediately. As they prepared to leave, Veltros noticed that Jinho had left the new sophisticated equipment untouched. Instead, he was packing his simple supplies, the same ones he'd used during the crisis. Corporal, we could bring some of the advanced equipment, Veltros suggested. No power on that ship, remember? Jinho said. Advanced equipment is useless without electricity, but tape doesn't need power. Pressure bandages don't need calibration. Sometimes the old ways are the only ways that work. They boarded the shuttle and launched toward the disabled ship. During the flight, Jinho briefed Veltros on what to expect. We'll have limited lighting, possibly no environmental controls, and frightened crew members. The key is to stay calm and work with what's available. We've done this before. We can do it again. How do you stay so calm? Perix asked. Doesn't the pressure affect you? Of course it affects me, Jinho said. But panic doesn't save lives. Focus does. You acknowledge the fear, set it aside, and concentrate on the work. My grandfather used to say, fear is just your body preparing to act.